अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to a very special episode of NL Hafta. We are recording this on the 1st of May, but by the time this goes online, it's going to be the 3rd of May, which is
Press Freedom Day.
Press Freedom Day. A day that's very important for us at News Laundry. It's because that's our business, but it's actually very important for everybody who lives or wants to live in a democracy, because a free press is what actually is one of the chief indicators and makes it democracy. It's a cause and effect, both. So happy Press Freedom Day to everybody. Before we get into the headlines and the discussion, let me introduce our panel. So on this very special Press Freedom Day, we have got you a very, very special guest who is joining us from Kunnur, Ramachandra Guha. Welcome, Ram.
Hi.
Although all our audience knows you, it is a formality that we have to boast your credentials, so just allow me to do that. Ramachandra Guha, as all of you know, is a historian, author, and one of India's foremost public intellectuals. He's published books on cricket, environment, politics, the history of pretty much everything. He has previously taught at the Indian Institute of Science, CREA, Stanford, Yale, Berlin Institute of Advanced Studies, Indian Institute of Science, and the University of California at Berkeley. And here comes my uncle joke. He held the, I'll probably mispronounce a lot of this, but he held the Arne Nass Chair at the University of Oslo, the Indo-American Community Chair at the University of California at Berkeley, and the Philippe Roman Chair in History at the International Affairs at the London School of Economics. So when you say 3 cheers for Ram Guha, they're very, very accomplished chairs.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Also joining me, embarrassed at my joke, Jayashree from Chennai.
No, I was waiting for the build up. Like there was a lot of build up for that joke. So
Yeah.
it wasn't as bad as I feared. But yeah.
Okay.
Hello.
Manisha Pande
Hi.
and Raman
Hi.
Kirpal. Just want to inform our audience, since it is Press Freedom Week, we have a offer for you. Since we don't take any ads of any kind from anyone, News Laundry is supported entirely by subscribers such as yourself. As a journalist, an independent media organization is important, and we take no ads. If you take no ads, then you are already out of the major source of revenue that most news organizations in this country use. So you are our lifeline. So on this Press Freedom Day, you can buy the joint News Laundry News Minute joint subscription. As you know, TNM and News Laundry are now partner organizations. And once you pay, give us a few hours to map your and your friend's subscription, because we're going to give you 1+1 offer. So you'll get a free subscription, and you can map that to any friend you want. It can be a friend who agrees with you. It can be a friend who disagrees with you, but is only consuming news that is ad funded, and that too Sarkari ad funded. Or you can give it to your WhatsApp uncle. You just have to click on the link in the show notes below. And this link will keep coming up, and there's a QR code also that is on your screen right now. So on the Press Freedom Day, gift yourself and a friend a 1+1 free offer subscription to make sure journalism is not dependent on ads, which is what Bapu had also said very long ago. Imagine he thought of it back then. So we obviously promise you an extremely informed and intellectual discussion today, with some uncle jokes thrown in. But before we turn our attention to Ram, let's turn our attention to the headlines.
Yes, here are the headlines of the week. So in the aftermath of the Pahalgam attack, the NIA has taken over the inquiry. The J&K authorities have demolished the homes of at least 10 suspected militants, and more than 2,000 people have been detained. 48 public parks and gardens in the Kashmir Valley have been shut. Pakistani troops reportedly violated the ceasefire along the LOC for 5 consecutive nights. And in Delhi, the Prime Minister has chaired multiple security meetings. He's also given the army full operational freedom to decide India's response to the attack, as stated by the PMO. The union government has also banned 16 Pakistani YouTube channels for allegedly disseminating false and provocative content. I think they also banned Pakistani soap operas, no?
Yeah, and Instagram
Actors.
and Twitter handles of the actors, etc.
Yeah. YouTube news channel 4PM was banned in India. This is because of a government order linked to national security or public order. And the UP police booked satirist Dr. Medusa and singer Neha Rathore for allegedly making objectionable remarks on the Pahalgam attack. Both women were booked for endangering sovereignty of India.
And apparently even Ranting Gola has been booked for, you don't even know what.
Sedition.
Incidents of violence and threats against Muslims were also reported in the aftermath of the attack. At least 16 shawl sellers from Kashmir left Mussoorie after 2 vendors were attacked by locals. In Mangalore, a man was lynched after he allegedly shouted pro-Pakistan slogans during a cricket match. In Aligarh, a 15-year-old Muslim student was assaulted and allegedly forced to urinate on a Pakistan flag. A pharmacy student from Jammu and Kashmir was attacked by a group of people in Nagpur. In Assam, the Himanta Biswa Sarma government arrested 27 people for allegedly defending Pakistan on Indian soil. And in Bengal, 2 Hindu men pasted a poster of the Pakistan flag in a railway station. They later said they hoped to create communal tension by writing Hindustan Murdabad, Pakistan Zindabad.
My God, man, it's just shocking.
Parade of horrific stories. Right. In Delhi, the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs has approved the enumeration of caste in the next census. This was announced by Ashwini Vaishnav, but he did not say when the exercise will take place. India signed a deal with France to buy 26 Rafale marine fighter aircraft with the Navy. They'll be procured at a cost of 64,000 crores. And in Manipur, 21 MLAs, all members of NDA parties, wrote to Home Minister Amit Shah. They urged him to restore popular government in the state. They said this is the only means to bring peace and normalcy.
And you will not see prime time on this.
In absolutely strange news, NCERT has released a new social science textbook for class 7. It's done away with chapters on the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughals. Instead, it gives primacy to ancient Indian dynasties and cultural heritage. It also has references to the 2025 Mahakumbh. Because why not?
I love Georgie's tweet on this. He says, wonderful. Now our students can learn that the Rajputs lost to no one.
Yes. In Delhi, as Chief Minister Rekha Gupta performed an arti of Baba Bageshwar, who was a self-styled gold man, the anti-corruption branch of the Delhi government filed a case. This is against AAP's Manish Sisodia and Satyendra Jain over an alleged scam in construction of schools and classrooms.
And just the same week, the Enforcement Directorate has filed a closure report on the Suresh Kalmadi and the Commonwealth Games.
15
Yes, this is 15 years after the
15-year-old case,
Yeah.
17-year-old case. So all, if you see the course of political, crime or whatever, whether it is ED or CBI, this is what happens normally.
Right.
Even like they have kept, a case CBI. There is a CBI case against this Mayawati, and they have kept it alive. It is dormant right now, but as and when she says something,
Yeah.
they will make it alive. Otherwise, the case will
That's
never get
nothing.
solved,
Right.
and in the end, they will just close it.
It is also worth mentioning that today, May 1st, is Suresh Kalmari's birthday.
Oh.
He is turning 80. So,
Wow.
yes. In news from the courts, the Madras High Court has held that public trust in the CBI is deteriorating. This is due to the agency's biased investigations, it said. And the Supreme Court, while hearing a 2021 batch of petitions against Pegasus, says there's nothing wrong with India possessing spyware for national security, but it did express concerns about its alleged misuse against private individuals. There are water wars between Punjab and Haryana. The Bakra BS Management Board has replaced its director of water regulation from a Punjab cadre officer to a Haryana one. Punjab reacted very strongly and stepped up security at the regulator end of the Nangal Dam. This is amidst fear of a law and order problem. The BBMB also decided to release 8,500 cusecs of water to Haryana on humanitarian grounds, a decision vehemently opposed by Punjab.
Yeah, because they say that Haryana has already used its share of the water. Well,
Yeah.
103%.
right.
And finally, as Trump completes 100 days in his second term, a new report has revealed that the US economy contracted for the first time in 3 years in its first quarter.
And
And
if
the headlines.
it contracts in one more quarter, we have a recession. So,
Huzzah.
on that note, I'm surprised that Jayashree also didn't mention today is May Day. Workers Unite.
Far more important
And we're
than
working.
Kalmari's birthday.
Far more important Kalmadi's birthday.
People have chutti on May Day, yeah.
Dude, in
हमको भी
Germany,
छुट्टी
in
मिलनी
Berlin, there's
चाहिए.
this march of the workers on May Day.
Yes.
On, what do you call in this road? What's it called? The guy with the beard? Karl Marx Road.
The guy with the beard.
Even today, I think in India also, I think many
There's a May Day march?
many offices are
Huh,
closed.
they're closed, yeah. But
Huh.
the May Day march in Berlin is like legendary.
Big
हम
हाँ.
काम कर रहे हैं सुबह 7 बजे से.
Of course. 'Cause we are the bourgeois. We are the labor. Don't first of all stop
I am
putting
labor.
yourself as labor. Stop it, you guys. You are the top 1%. Just
मैं तो labor
stop
ही हूँ.
it. Just stop it. Okay. Great. Let's get back to Ram Guha. Ram, on Press Freedom Week, can you just give us a little history of press freedom in India? Was there ever a golden age? We keep saying there wasn't, but was there?
Well, there wasn't a golden age, but there were ages that were more dark and ages that were more light.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a college student in Delhi during the emergency. I had started reading the newspaper before then in English. And I was there in Delhi, and of course, it was complete propaganda. And though radio, of course, was state controlled.
Mm-hmm.
The joke was it was called all Indira radio,
Oh, was it? Okay.
AIR.
Mm.
And but newspapers, though technically free, were rigorously censored.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few brave English newspapers that occasionally carried dissenting opinions. But the important difference then after that, so you have the emergency, then you have a liberating period after the emergency. So the emergency is lifted. Suddenly there's more freedom. A different party is coming to power, and also the new technology is available. Offset printing becomes available for the first time in the late 70s and early 80s. So a newspaper can publish the same edition in many different cities and get reports from many different parts of India simultaneously. Then, of course, you have the cable news evolution. And I'd say the 80s were a time when there was a lot of freedom and creativity in English and in regional languages. And I'd urge your viewers, those who still like to read books, to pick up a wonderful book called India's Newspaper Revolution by Robin Jeffrey, a very fine Australian historian of India. And his book, India's Newspaper Revolution, is an authoritative account of how post-emergency there was an efflorescence of newspapers, magazines in different languages, showing their creativity. Now, obviously, the last decade and so on, that has changed radically. And if you wish, I can talk a little bit about the differences and similarities between the emergency and now. There are two very striking similarities. One is that you have a government in Delhi that seeks very systematically, like Indira Gandhi's government, to control, manipulate, doctor, direct all forms of media. Digital media, print media, television media, and so on. That's one similarity. The second similarity is that you have a government in Delhi that seeks to, during the emergency, seeks to promote, burnish, enhance, magnify a personality cult of the Prime Minister. So Indira is India and was India, now Modi is India. Those are the similarities which are very disturbing. Now, at the same time, there are some dissimilarities. One is that, which should also be noted. They should not be overestimated, but these differences should be noted. One is that during the emergency, the Congress party of Indira Gandhi was in power in Delhi and in all states except Tamil Nadu. Today,
Wow.
you have actually, state governments that are not run by the BJP in many parts of India.
Yeah.
And if you were to look only at the English newspapers printed in this country, I would say that the more submissive and the more propagandist English newspapers operate out of Delhi, the less submissive and the more open-minded and slightly more free and critical newspapers operate outside Delhi. So and usually in governments that are not run by the BJP.
Right.
So I write for the Telegraph, where I've had full freedom writing in my column for the last 30 years. I've criticized the Congress, the left, the BJP, the regional parties. Now, that could be because Bengal has never been ruled by the BJP.
Right.
Likewise, so I think this is one difference. The other difference is you have spaces in the digital media, like yours, and others one could mention, like Scroll, which is one of my favorite websites, or News Minute, which operates out of my hometown, Bangalore, that are more open, more reflective, more report-based, more independent. So I'd say, broadly speaking, the situation is rather dire. But as a historian, I would have to say that it was even worse during the emergency. This is not to feel complacent or happy about where we are now,
Also,
but it's
yeah.
some historical perspective.
Also, it's 2025, and that was, the 70s, the big difference. So I'll just quickly go around the panel because I'm sure you also have questions for Ram. We don't get Ram every day. But briefly, Ram, because I just want to go to Raman from his experience. I read a policy paper, I think about 6-7 years ago. I was curious as to why, while they're relaxing the rules and that private parties can broadcast news on the television, radio FM had way more tight rules for news. They will not allow private news on radio, even though they try. And apparently, in that policy paper, and there is some historical evidence the world over, the pace at which news travels on radio is like TV cannot even compare to that. And it was a revelation to me. I mean, is that true? And that is why till today, the television broadcast was liberalized. Private parties could do news. It's almost been 20 years now. I think early 2002 was the first news channel, if I'm not wrong. It's been 23 years. Even today, FM is not allowed to do news. So is there something special about radio? I mean, I don't
Some
get
logic to it.
it. Yeah, is there a logic?
That's quite interesting. I mean, because if you look at the experience of Soviet-run Eastern Europe, which was an extremely authoritarian part of the world, dissident radio, beamed into Hungary and Poland and Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia from other Western Europe in their languages, not in English, in American, but in Czech and Polish and Hungarian, played a critical role in the awakening of the 80s that led to the dismantling of the Soviet Empire. So maybe they know some of this.
So there is some historical evidence to radio's effectiveness. Okay.
Absolutely.
So
no, I think radio has started serving the interest of the government in Delhi. If you see, you also listen to it. My house is pretty far from the office, so I get 2 hours listening to the radio. When I'm driving and then driving back to almost 4 hours. So they, as Ram said about this cult, Modi cult.
Yeah.
So the government has found the way to promote Modi cult through the FM radio. So you will see often, Man Ki Baat.
Yeah,
is
all
coming up.
of them are doing, because even from point of view of market,
Good example. Yeah.
Yes.
it doesn't make sense, because if there are 5 channels and the other 4 are playing Man Ki Baat, me as a channel owner should say I should not play Man Ki Baat because I cannot compete for those.
True.
But yet everybody plays Man Ki Baat.
So I think radio, they are very cleverly using this radio. And besides, if you see since 2014, there is a surge in issuing license or giving permission for the community radio. If you have heard of this is the very local community radio where they used to give permission just to promote the local
I know someone who actually runs a community
language,
radio
local culture
in Haryana.
Yeah.
But again, it's highly regulated. I mean, you so much as mention anything that can be seen as news or current affairs, you have held
It's
to
just
pay.
the Modi cult.
In fact,
Let me just say one qualifying remark. When I said that you have spaces open to non-BJP, because the fact that the whole of the country is not run by the BJP. At the same time, I'd say what respect in which the Modi regime has gone farther than the Indira Gandhi regime is they weaponize the agencies in a much more systematic and ruthless way. So we should apply to radio owners as well and TV owners that you may not be in Delhi, you may not be in even a BJP-ruled state, but in Bangalore or in Chennai or in Trivandrum, you can still have your offices raided by a central agency.
Right.
So that intimidatory power, which was always there, has been exercised in a much more systematic and ruthless way by the current regime.
and one more thing, and like Raman sir pointed out, there was a 3-page ad by Mamta. It's not just stick, carrot also. See, revenue. We've done so many stories of Network 18, the amount of ad money that was spent on Kumbh ads. I mean, for the month of the Kumbh and the month before that, a significant chunk of all broadcast news revenue came from Kumbh ads. Yeah, every second ad was the Kumbh ad.
Yeah. And there
So-
were slots, like big half-an-hour chunks.
And,
That
and then there was a show on the Kumbh,
Yeah.
followed by that Kumbh ad. So, and that is something also, Ram, I'm sure all the parties had that budget. But the way it's been
Yeah.
weaponized by everybody now, no matter
Absolutely,
which
yeah.
party.
So I think just again one footnote on the question of personality cult. There's a mega cult of Modi in Delhi, but there are medium-sized cults of Mamta in Bengal, Vijay
yes.
in Kerala, Stalin in Tamil Nadu,
Hmm.
and till recently Kejriwal in
Delhi.
Delhi.
Hmm.
So at that becomes so the local state media has to satisfy the urgings of that local cult. There can be no
Exactly.
other BJP cult. Fadnavis cannot have a cult.
Right.
Whichever Yadav or Sharma or whatever is in power in the northern states has to be in a BJP regime has to be totally, obscure and invisible and uncharismatic. But certainly with Mamta, Stalin, Vijayan, who's supposed to be a communist opposed to personality cults, and of course Kejriwal when he was in power. I mean, it's rather colossal. I mean, at the level of the state, it is as significant in distorting debate, opinion, as Modi's is at the level of the nation as a whole.
Before we move to Chennai, Manisha, on press freedom, you have been covering it now, of course, for a decade now. Downward slide, each time you think we've hit a new low, then you say, no, we haven't yet. There's another new low's come.
I know. And I think just on the differences that Ram was talking about, what Indira Gandhi did with the press and what we're seeing in the Modi years, I don't know how it was back then, but I think a key difference is surely, and I don't think this has happened before, the sheer anti-people quality of the media. Whether it's talking about thuk jihad, love jihad, painting minorities as people who will steal your women, spit on your food, or that daily kind of finding an enemy and going after them. That is relentless. And I've said this before, I see this from 2016 onwards, after the JNU sedition case. That's the first time. So it's one thing to build a personality cult. It's one thing to praise the leader in power. It's one thing to say that the opposition is shit. But it's quite another to, demonize people who are against a government. As in, your Tukre Tukre gang, they are stooges of ISI. And you've had real life repercussions of this, like Sudha Bhardwaj, who goes to jail under UAPA. Every activist who's done jail time or is under some UAPA or a sedition law, it starts off with a media campaign. So that, I think, is a very chief feature of what has happened in the last 10 years. That there's a very decided anti-people focus of the media where they just turn against the very people that they're supposed to be serving. And that's very devious. It can't be, it's not political bias. It's not ideology. It's just sheer anti-people stuff that we see on the media. And that's
any such
very
examples in
dangerous.
other parts of the world, Ram, historically?
So I agree with very much agree with Manisha. It's made a very important point because again, one difference between Modi and Indira Gandhi is Indira Gandhi was unquestionably authoritarian. Modi is a regime, and Modi's party and Modi's parivar is authoritarian as well as majoritarian. And much of the stigma, of course, Manisha is right. The demonization is often of brave, independent-minded activists like Sudha Bhardwaj and Umar Khalid. And in Umar Khalid's case, there's also the burden of not being a Hindu,
Right.
and hence the demonization of the whole community. Now, of course, I just say this is now we are seeing disturbingly a global trend. The descent of formerly reasonably democratic regimes into substantially authoritarian states. It's been visible in Turkey, in Israel, in Hungary, in India, and now probably most dramatically in the United States, and with most visible consequences because of the economic and military power of the United States. And if you look at the capitulation of the Washington Post, it would be a striking example of this. And though, of course, it hasn't gone to this level. I mean, Manisha has really laid her hands on something quite important. Because you may have, shall we say, a right-wing newspaper in America, which worships Trump, mocking Trump's critics. But they would rarely use the vicious, personalized, debased, and really awful language that sections of Indian media will use against the kind of people Manisha has mentioned.
Right.
So it's really dehumanizing. In fact, again,
It's
very interesting.
dehumanizing. Yeah.
As a historian, I would say this kind of language that is used in a right-wing authoritarian context was previously used much more widely by left-wing authoritarian regimes. This is the kind of things that the Chinese state would call the Dalai Lama, or the Russian state would call Andrei Sakharov, termite, gutter, whatever, scum of the earth. I mean, that kind of, even, of course, Hitler would do it. I mean, Hitler and so on would do it. So it's really this kind of the debasing of language. You mentioned Gandhi. Now, I mean, not everyone can be a Gandhi, but what are the legacies that Gandhi left behind? That stayed right, I'd say, up till the Vajpayee regime, is that there was a certain tamiz in political discourse. You disagreed, but you didn't name call. You didn't question a person's patriotism, his honesty, her probity. You didn't say they were agents of foreign powers. Now everyone, I mean, I'm sure, that for some people who were not many, but some people who have watched this program, we are all being funded by George Soros.
Yeah, we get that a lot.
Look at what's happened in the aftermath of Pahalgam, where you've had, retired army officers come say that, we must not fight among ourselves. This is not about Muslims. Don't attack Kashmiris. You've had victims who've lost. I mean, they're faced with such a tragedy. They've seen something so terrible. And you've had wives who've lost husbands appeal that, let us not attack.
Exactly, I saw that today.
And yet see what news channels are doing.
Yeah, it's really
The very first day, the first thing was to just say, let's go at Muslims, let's go at Kashmiris. And so in that sense, I think it's worse than even BJP in many cases. Even Rajnath Singh this week earlier on said that, this is not about Kashmiris, it's not about Muslims, we have to stand united. But anchors would not relent. So I think it's another beast of its own now.
No, I was witness to this, how it started. It was in 2016. I was with one of the editors with DNA. And Subhash Chandra once, he called all the DNA. I mean, I was witness to it. I was present in that meeting where he said that now onwards, we are going to make nationalism the main news. And nobody will question that. Okay. Within a week, there's one senior person came to me and there were 2 Kashmiris in my bureau. So they asked me to let them go, sack them. Okay, it all started, and how
With a
this
clear instruction.
nationalism, it became nationalism became the main plank for all the TV
Channels,
media and the newspapers, and that's how they are dehumanizing.
In fact, the JNU sedition case, Z News was at the forefront of the whole case.
Yes.
No, but let me just get our Chennai Newslaundry office in the
Office.
but like in Bengal, we know from our friends, Mamta is really with an iron fist she rules. It is very hard to be critical of Mamta there. Just like in Telangana, KCR. KCR was unforgiving of journalists who tried to criticize. That's why most of the stories or investigations about his government were happening outside Telangana. Because he was, would really be as authoritarian as anybody else. But Stalin hasn't got that reputation yet. Is it because he's managed it well, or is it because he's genuinely not as bad as the rest?
No, also because the easiest point of comparison would be Jayalalitha, who was extremely tight when it came to reacting to news stories.
Yeah, in fact, after she died, some 169 cases or something against journalists.
So
Maximum
nothing can really stack up to that. Now, see, my thing is there are no... I mean, when we say if one is better than the other, one is probably better than the other, but at the end of the day, they're all politicians and they're all serving certain interests which are supposedly for the greater good of the public and all, but which are not. And the thing is that Raman sir was saying that, they got that directive on we're going to be nationalists and stuff like that. So between all of us on this panel, I think we've all worked in maybe like a total of 10 or 15 newsrooms, and you don't realize the kind of decisions that take place in newsrooms until you work in one. Could be something as benign as a report on a hospital or whatever, and on a city page, but you're like, no, it will not be carried because of certain decisions, or you're taking this decision because you don't want to annoy somebody who's in the government. And this is in good newspapers and bad newspapers. So we see the worst of it in news channels, but it exists at every level in all these newspapers, all these newsrooms that we also speak of quite respectfully. But a version of this does take place. And I think that is where media is failing. Like, I know I often say that I don't think India is a democracy. Like, just holding elections doesn't make you a democracy. But yeah, at the end of the day, we do have many flavors of media that do exist and continue to exist and continue to report. So, by that definition, I do think that there is hope and value and whatever. But the other thing I want to say about press freedom, though, is that we. So, I mean, we're all independent practitioners, right? And then people ask me this a lot. They're like, do you feel afraid? Like, does your organization afraid? And I always feel like we ask those questions to the wrong people. So for me, for example, my answer to that is no, of course I'm not, because I mean, I am privileged in terms of my religion, my caste, my class, my background, my connections. Even if I am not personally friends with a civil servant, there are like maybe 2 degrees of separation, and I will find someone who can help me. But these are not the resources and the stakes for most of the people who work in the business. These are much smaller journalists, they're much smaller RTI activists and others on the ground who are asking real questions. And in a real democracy, these are the people that we should worry about, and these are the people we should protect. So I think in elite newsrooms, we are safer than others. I mean, we are also at risk, and yet we are also safe. So there is that sort of contradiction in how we look at it. And I feel the nature of the work is what is important. I mean, look at someone like Sanjeev Bhatt. He took on the wrong people in the category to which he belongs in. He's an exception. But the same engine is wreaked on multiple vulnerable people day in and day out. Those who don't have connections and those who don't have the privilege to use it as a shield. So I worry a lot about that. Like, I feel like we are sort of amplifying the same issues amongst ourselves, but then there are so many others, what colonial masters would have called the unbathed masses, who also exist and who also struggle and also work, but also don't have the kind of connection that we do. So
Yeah.
and that is scary. But yeah.
So
Also, I mean, about America, I mean, I agree that yes, they wouldn't use the sort of language that we see, this sort of level of discourse of parasite or insect or whatever. But also, I do think that even though the US is this beacon of democracy and liberal democracy, that top media organizations are still quite hand in glove with the ruling class. I would say, like, within a small window, they will ask questions and make people uncomfortable, but I don't think they fundamentally are shaking up the system in the way that they could. So
I mean, I think that they can shift fast. They are a lot more nimble like that, which are institutionally we not. I guess because of institutional memory. But Ram, just before I come to Manisha, and then we'll move to Kashmir after that. On the whole thing, I mean, while I get what Jayashree is saying, that everyone's a politician, but yet there are degrees of differences. I think the Modi model has been adopted by many. I mean, I'm not saying Congress was wonderful, but the anger and viciousness with which, at least the Congress of my time, I'm not talking about Indira's, but also they didn't have that kind of mandate, I guess. After that, a UPA wasn't that mandate. Even now, I mean, you hear of some extreme cases in Punjab even, where, AAP is there. Of course, we know about Telangana, we know about Bengal, but you don't hear about a Congress-ruled Himachal Pradesh coming down on a journalist the way, Himanta Biswa Sarma comes down on them in Assam. I think at some level, the Congress is, I'm not saying they're wonderful and fair, but they're less vicious than all the rest. Would you, I mean, historically, that may not be accurate, but contemporary-wise, I think it does kind of.
No, before I come to the question, I think just briefly allude to one aspect which all of you are aware of, and which is the reason you don't take ads, is there are 2 major threats to media freedom. One emanates from the state, which we've discussed so far, and the other emanates from corporate interests.
Right.
And this is also fairly long-standing. So I'll give you an example that goes back to the early 80s. 3 of my close college friends became journalists. 2 sold their soul to ruling party politicians. 1 retained his independence. So largely retained his independence. I think I'd say almost wholly retained his independence. Now, that person in the early 80s wanted to do a story on chemical contamination. This is just before Bhopal, a year or 2 before Bhopal. And his 2 college friends in my presence advised him, "Aisa mat karo. Your magazine's corporate, MD will be upset. Corporate funding will go." Now, 40 years later, it is much worse. If you look at, for example, the threats and the legal harassment of journalists by Adani, by Ambani. I mean, if you look at one visible recent example, the scrubbing of so many sources from the net of stories and well researched and rather credible and important stories on the scandal that is the Vantara Zoo and all the laws that it has violated. So I think this is one thing we should absolutely be sensible of, how corporate interests has manipulated, distorted the functioning of the media and played almost not as important, but a substantially important role alongside repression by political parties and state and central government. So I think I wanted to just flag that. Now, on the Congress, I'll tell you, I'll be honest. Of course, the Congress doesn't have that kind of ruthlessness, but still, there are elements of the media that are, also, they're much smaller, they're much less visible, but they are critical of the Modi government and they will not be critical of the Congress. Now, you know my position on this.
Sure.
My view, articulated for many years, is that the dynastic culture of the Congress stinks. It was a very baleful example for other parties, including as Jayashree will certify, the DMK becoming a family party, the Shiv Sena, and so on. And there are certain credible, brave, independent media organizations will never talk about this. We take it for granted that Rahul Gandhi will always be leader of the Congress party and he'll have Sonia on his left and Priyanka on his right. Although this vitiates every principle of democracy and republicanism, it is also a form of monarchy in the same way as Modi's one-person rule is. And so I think this is something where what happens often, and I'd say this, like Jayashree's feedback on this, Jayashree is absolutely right, that Jayalalitha was truly awful. So, so you judge Stalin is not as bad. But at the same time, many Tamil intellectuals will never criticize Stalin anointing his son as a successor, even though they are more qualified people, because they feel this will give ammunition to BJP. Similarly, many people in Delhi, some news websites in Delhi will not criticize the cult of the Gandhis because they think it will give
BJP some
succor to
ammunition.
the ruling regime. But I believe a journalist must be truly independent of every political party and every politician. And I think that's something I'd like to say. I mean, just to say, yes, at one level, the Congress is not as bad. But, when the history of, let me make one rather bold and possibly reckless prediction. When the history of India's descent into authoritarianism and majoritarianism is written, it can only be written 20, 30 years from now because you need that distance. I'll be dead. And some of you will be still around to read the history, whoever writes it. It will be shown that this descent had two sets of facilitators, the BJP and the RSS on the one side, and the Congress party of the Gandhis on the other. So I think that, of course, there's an asymmetry. Side one has contributed much more to the decline of democracy and even the decline of press freedom. So I think this is where I am always hesitant as an independent writer to say, if there's a lesser evil, let's not even call it an evil.
So sorry, just 2 or 3 points I want to make. I agree with half of what you said, Ram, and I small disagree with some of it. One is you could still be alive 50 years from now. Ramdev will have invented a medicine by then. In addition to curing COVID, cancer, homosexuality, he'll also be able to cure death, I'm sure. In fact, today again, the court hauled him up because after telling the court that he will not do any anti-Hamdard thing, he did it again. So on that, you may be wrong. While I just want to acknowledge that, yes, the Congress isn't as bad, let us also remind people Saftar Hashmi was beaten to death by Congress goons. It was one of the most
brutal killings.
killings
in Delhi,
of a man who was so amazingly gifted. I mean, it was, but at the same time, today's Congress is, I guess, different. But on two issues, Ram. One is that the cult. What you're saying is, Stalin's son.
Right.
I'm not sure the reason for that anymore is a desire for families to cling on to power. and I've discussed this earlier, at least from what I understand, and I guess journalists who cover this on a daily basis, their motivation, some of them may be because they don't want to give BJP ammunition. But I think at one level, it is also understanding, like the cult of Modi, there is a political wisdom to it, which I think is a outcome of the digital age, where the world over, that Argentine president, the guy who was going on with the saw, I think he did the chainsaw before Musk did. He was such an over-the-top character. The guy who won the election, which was then later cancelled, that YouTube character, which country cancelled its election? It'll just come to me. Because they said he's basically a YouTube character. Basically, TikTok has, I'll just tell you. Then Trump. Reality stars, it's all about the character. And today also, while I agree that, Rahul Gandhi may not be the best qualified, he's the only glue that holds the Congress together. If there is no Gandhi, Kamal Nath, of course, is irrelevant now, but he would have set out his own little thing in Madhya Pradesh. Gehlot would have set out his own little thing. The only reason they can't do that is because there is someone who has a pan-India. I mean, they got 29% of the vote share in the country. No one else in the Congress can get that. And I think that is an outcome of today's influencer economy, where whether it's an Insta influencer, it's a Twitter influencer, it's a TikTok influencer, that's how our brains are wired. And I think politicians have understood that dude, I got to be the dude. They should see my face everywhere. And that will get you votes. So it's also strategically, I think, smart. And if you see the world over, out of the, ordinary characters are getting the votes, not necessarily the smartest people. So do you think there's something to do with that? And it may not be just...
That's a correction. It's not 29%, it's 19%. Anyway.
Sorry, 19, okay.
That's the issue I want to put on the table. I mean, that's, obviously there are larger issues we have to deal with. Yeah.
Gandhi family, Congress as Gandhi, whatever, party essentially is pre-social media. And the reason why it is so is because the people in the top didn't work hard enough to make this a party which could truly represent or have others who could rival Gandhis. It's not that Instagram came and then so Rahul Gandhi had to kind of take on the mantle. He's been given that since he was born.
Even before. But, sorry, it's just come to me. It was Romania. A recount of votes cast on Sunday's first final round. This, of course, happened last year in November. A surprise winner called Calin Georgescu, because he went viral on Twitter. He had no political background, nothing. And he bloody beat the established political parties. Of course, they cancelled it, saying that there'll be another election because who's this dude? TikTok stars cannot become...
What you say is also true of Berlusconi, Trump, and Zelensky.
Right.
They are also outside politics. They're creators of the media, creators of the media and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So, sorry, anything on this before we move on to Kashmir? Jayashree was saying something.
Yeah, I was thinking, I completely agree with Ram on that. I used to once have this colleague. He was a fantastic reporter. He used to report from the southern states. So he was of the mind that, like how you said that people are sort of reluctant to criticize the Congress because they're like, well, you're feeding into ammunition that everybody else needs to, the BJP doesn't need it. And there's a time and place to criticize the Congress and it is not this time. So this colleague of mine was also of the view that journalists should report keeping those things in mind. He was like, you should report on something truthfully and honestly, but you should also keep in mind the larger picture. Like, can this be used by somebody else? And I used to have a fundamental argument with him because I just don't see that. I think your job is that you report. If there is a story, you report on it. You should not be gauging whether the story will be used by X or by Y to be manipulated in a particular way. And I think that does happen a lot. And like you said, like we are very reluctant to sort of criticize the DMK also because the BJP is so much worse. It is fundamentally so much worse. So therefore we don't. But we do. Then the Stalin, see, like Stalin marked his time in the DMK. Like he was in politics for decades and he waited and then he started in his teens. He worked his way up. He was mayor. He was everything. And then he became chief minister. Then Stalin did none of those things. He was a very well-known actor and producer, again, due to family connections, whatever. And then he contested his first election like 3 years ago. And then now he's deputy chief minister. So I do think there's a huge difference in that. I mean, this is a very classic example of a man who got the job just because his father is Stalin. I would argue not so much. He did have to put in the work for it, but Udayanidhi Stalin for sure.
I just want to take this conversation on, not criticizing a party because that gives BJP ammunition to the intellectual side of things. And I've often thought of that, and especially after reading your book, Ram, The Cooking of Books, which I think is fabulous. Everyone should read it. Everyone should pick it up.
Told me that I have to read the book. In fact, that's on my table.
It's a thin book, but I really took my time to read it because I just didn't want it to get over. And one of the interesting things that you notice in the book is that, see, today it's all liberals versus the right. But and liberals are this umbrella and it's one group and the right is one group, but it wasn't so earlier. The liberals within themselves had a lot of arguments. It wasn't this one camp. In fact, 2009 I became a journalist, and 2009 to 12 it was actually a very exciting time where people so-called within the liberal umbrella would argue it out quite a bit with each other. I remember like Arundhati Roy's piece on you on Outlook, then your response to her, Hartosh talking about, Jaipur Lit Fest. So there was this lot of kind of, debate.
Ronak rendi thi.
No, and also just, agreeing, disagreeing with people who are not necessarily on the opposite spectrum. And I find that very laborious today, that, this, at one level I get it. We can't argue with each other because one person is fighting a terror case, the other person is fighting a sedition case. So you have to have those broader solidarities. And you can't get into like, tumne ye book dal, ye. So I get that. But it also kills the fun, the curiosity, and also the fun of, like debate with people who can actually
debate. It makes
debate.
discourse less intelligent.
Yeah, it makes discourse less. What do you think about that? Do you find it
Absolutely.
tiring now?
I mean, one of my, to me, one of the most stimulating exchanges I've ever had was with Amartya Sen in EPW on the uses and abuses of history for settling political debates. And, we had different positions, but we were very civilized that we articulated them. And he's a scholar I hugely admired. But I felt at some stage one had to criticize some of what he said for intellectual and even political reasons, not for personal reasons. So I think that is something that has gone out. And EPW used to be a fora for those kinds of debates. I mean, unfortunately, it's declined quite a lot. And also, you don't have even the outside of EPW, places like the Hindu and Outlook would have long-form journalism. Now that's gone. I mean, it's shifted to maybe, places like you where you have a discussion for an hour. But it is, I think, Manisha is absolutely right. We should not, that is for refining your own ideas. It's often more important to have critical exchanges with people who are broadly on your side than, join with them in attacking the other side.
Exactly.
Right? So, and, this book, that Cooking of Books that Manisha mentioned, I mean, it's about a 4-decade friendship conducted largely through correspondence with a friend with whom I shared a lot and disagreed quite vehemently on certain things. And, I think, so I think that's true. I mean, it's become very, very polarized now.
And absolutely right. Like if you want to refine your own ideas, it's often with people maybe on the same ideological spectrum as you, because you're really
good faith arguments really help. Yeah, I completely agree. So before we move on to Kashmir, just want to once again remind you that it is Press Freedom Day and so Press Freedom Week for Hafta. You can buy a special Press Freedom Day offer, which is a Newslaundry Newsminute joint subscription, and you can get 1 + 1 free for a friend, a family member of your choice, or a WhatsApp uncle. You can click on the link below or scan the QR code on your screens right now. And on Press Freedom Day, support journalists who are going out and doing on-ground reports. And like we've told you, we carry very few opinion pieces, and that too from area experts, not just anything for clickbait. But our meat and potatoes is ground reports. And our reporters are always on the ground getting you something.
I hope this offer is open to the gifts to WhatsApp aunties are also allowed.
Yes, absolutely. WhatsApp aunties also. Let's not be sexist on that. There can be all sorts of fake news that come from both sides. But now coming to Kashmir, Ram, I don't know whether you have the answer, but I just want to share an observation. It happened the second time. I listened to this podcast called And the Rest is History. It's a fantastic podcast from their entire, it's the same studio that also brings out Willie Dalrymple's podcast, and it also has, and the rest is, what was the other one? I forget.
Rest is politics.
The rest is politics, sorry, yes. And the rest is politics is the one I'm talking about. and they have the rest is history. So I was listening to the rest is politics, and they explain it on Kashmir.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's very hard to say whether I've been fed on propaganda, but I believe I'm not a pro-propaganda. When the UPA was in power, I was doing dharnas against UPA. But I have noticed, including the one, this is day before yesterday's episode, they explain it on Kashmir. Somehow they never say, and we've carried a piece on that any terrorists were either trained in Pakistan or Pakistan had anything to do with the disturbance in Kashmir. It is always, at the same time, they don't say it's not.
Hmm.
Like, even when they describe the people, the terrorists, and I will happily use the word terrorists because I think that's what they were, who killed the tourists, they describe them as people with guns. And you can make out how they're walking over, walking
Yeah.
around eggshells when they're discussing this. And somehow it's like, dono same, 50-50. And the one thing that they said is that, this region had a majority Muslim population and a largely indigenous, largely homegrown uprising, which is not true. I understand. I've been to Kashmir at least a dozen times, if not more, in the last 25, 30 years.
It's not entirely homegrown.
It's exactly. And also, yes, now less so, but earlier, a regular Kashmiri would not consider himself Indian, and they had no qualms in saying it to you. Just normally, there were no mobile cameras, but at the same time, they didn't hate India, but they said, no, we're not you, we are us.
Yeah.
But why is the Western media like that, or is it that we have been conditioned to believe that nahi, ye to hamare young hai? What is the historical context of this conflict? How the world sees it? Because it's very different, and these are not voices that are ignorant or prejudiced, as the right wing would believe. Like, what do they get? It's not like Pakistan can afford to pay them anything. But why is it like that, Ram?
That's a very long question. I mean, the British, the rest is politics. I've not heard this particular podcast. I'll hear it tonight, now that you mentioned it after our show. But it's curated by two very able British journalists, British writers and journalists. And Britain has always had a rather distorted position on Kashmir. Partly because of their role in the partition, partly to compensate about what they did in the Middle East, which was to dispossess the Muslims and create as a Hellenist homeland. Partly because of the influence of Mirpuri Muslims and Pakistanis on elections in Labour-held constituencies in northern England. It's a very, very complicated reason why, British thinkers of the Labour Party sensibility broadly have been, and even some conservatives have been, shall we say, inclined to give Pakistan the benefit of the doubt in many things. Now, it's very clear that, as you say, and as Manisha also said, that there was discontent against the heavy-handedness of the Indian state in Kashmir. And particularly, if you look at the uprising that started in 1989, with the manipulation and fixing of the 1987 elections by Rajiv Gandhi's government. So there was discontent. There was also discrimination before. There was corruption. So the Indian state has behaved with less than honorable intentions in Kashmir. This is documented at great length in my book, India After Gandhi. Having said that, the insurgency and the protests and the uprising could never have taken the shape it did had it not been for Pakistan's total involvement. And a critical year is 1989, and I would expect those curators of the rest is politics to understand the significance of 1989. For them, 1989 is Berlin Wall and end of the Soviet Empire. But it's also the end of the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and the freeing of hundreds and indeed thousands of mujahideen to come and fight in Kashmir. And not just from Pakistan, but from Chechnya and Turkey and Iran. And what happened after 1989 were two things. One was there was a much more direct Pakistani involvement than, shall we say, the same case in 65, and explicitly Islamic caste. A jihadist caste, which was not there in the home. Sheikh Abdullah, who once promoted independence for Kashmir, was a completely secular man. Amanullah Khan, who started the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, was a completely secular man. All this changed from the early 90s, and it became much more radicalized and communalized. And of course, Pakistan was critically involved in many terror attacks. I mean, 2008 most obviously, but many bomb blasts in different parts of India. So I think this is incontrovertible. So it's incontrovertible that Pakistan has aided, supported, funded terror. It's also incontrovertible that the Indian state has made many mistakes in Kashmir, and both Congress and BJP regimes. The Congress regimes in the past and the BJP regime in the current context. I mean, Amit Shah promised on the floor of the House in August 2019 that statehood would be restored as early as possible.
Right.
It's now almost 6 years. So it's a very, it is really, it's arguable and it's possible and it's likely that Pakistan's hands are dirtier and bloodier when it comes to Kashmir. But the hands of the Indian government are not entirely clean either. So I think that's what we should recognize. And I'd say one thing in the context of the Pahalgam attack, and my next column, which will appear on Saturday, argues this. I'd say that the terror attack in Pakistan, and I have no hesitation in Pahalgam, and I have no hesitation in calling it a terror attack and nothing else, in some way facilitated from across the border. It poses two sorts of tests. One set of tests is to the Indian government. हम क्या करेंगे? What will be our military response, our political response? Will we, have another strike? Will we stop the Indus waters? That is one set of response, which is the Indian state's responsibility, and is within their powers to decide. And I have no locus standi. I'm not a guru. I'm not a Rajguru or a expert on war who can advise them. But there's a second set of tests which is to the Indian people, and particularly in light of the absolute heroism shown by Kashmiris in the light of what happened, and how they rushed to provide succor to the suffering, the wounded, the dead. Mosques were opened to give refuge to tourists. Taxi drivers ferried people, did not take. I mean, there's so many dozens of examples documented.
Right.
In the light of this, why hasn't the Prime Minister and the Home Minister said anything about the wave of attacks on Kashmiris in different parts of India?
That is really
Why is the
shocking.
media standing up about on that? So as Indians, our main, forget what our government does, but as Indians, our moral and human responsibility is to refuse to demonize Kashmiris or indeed, Indian Muslims in other parts of India.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
That is something which all of us must, this must be absolutely critically aware.
No, absolutely. I think
you like me, Abhinandan, are from Dehradun.
right.
And yesterday there was news report about 16
Masuri.
Yeah.
being asked to go home.
I saw
Before
the
that,
video.
Kashmiri students in Dehradun,
Yeah.
all of that.
Did you see the video? It was
Yeah,
really
it was
heartbreaking, and
ghastly.
and you could see that road. We are all familiar with that road. In fact, Dehradun's Manisha is also from Dehradun. So as Indians, we should, and I think that's something I think Modi's base is not going to leave him, but he never calls for calm. He never calls for stop these attacks on people.
One statement by him, "Aisa nahi karo," and it will stop.
Yeah,
And
he
Manisha is
just-
nice. And Manisha, nice to know you're from Dehradun.
Yes,
too.
she's also Dehradun girl.
But Manisha is right. The only person who has said anything is Rajnath Singh.
Rajnath
Even
Singh.
here he said,
Yeah.
all of us are united irrespective of religion. So I think one statement by Modi, given the aura and the influence he commands, will stop all of
But
us.
he never does
And
that.
then that is the anger that feeds back into Kashmir, where people are like, we had a strike for a whole day, we had a bandh, we all came out in protest against the attacks. Where are your protests when we get attacked? Who's standing for us?
I mean, I don't know how true it is, but just before we started recording, one of the channels was running that Pete Hegseth had a chat with Rajnath Singh. Of course, I don't know how long Pete Hegseth will be around because some of the...
Did they chat on Signal?
Forget the chat on Signal. After that, the first one, then the second one, his wife and lawyer and his brother. And then after that, the way he tried to defend it on an interview, he made a complete ass of himself. I mean, so I don't know how relevant Hegseth is, but they're saying that America has kind of given its blessings that India can strike back. Now, I don't know.
Oh.
I would not trust a broadcast news saying
because
that.
Trump was very, very... His statement was, oh, they've been fighting for 1,000 years.
1,500 years.
It's so bad. They're both very close to me. He didn't say anything. I mean, the thing that you were saying about the media, why are they not outrightly calling it a terror attack? Look at Modi's best friend, Donald Trump. He did not outrightly say that I'm with India or that we feel bad that they've had to suffer this, whatever tweeting and all they did. But in his statements, he was like, oh, both of them are very good friends of mine.
I think
It's
there's
very
no.
bad what's happening.
I think there's no
But it's
point.
true that Rajnath Singh's office has tweeted saying that the US has clearly said we support India's right to defend. So
Which
No,
is a bit
But that's
vague.
a normal statement they
Yeah.
give every time, that everyone supports the right to defend. But can you go on the offensive is the question.
No, I think there's no point, saying that it's dehumanizing. No, I think it's the new normal.
Yeah, that's what's unfortunate. Like
And
I was
things are getting legitimized. Everything is getting
I was just
legitimized.
watching Times now, which I think is trying to race ahead in the contest for who can ferment more trouble. Ram, I'm sure you don't watch these channels. You please write your book so we have something wonderful to read.
Yes.
But they had run a split screen. On one half of the screen, there is a bus driver reading namaz. On the other half of the screen, they have those mollies and all that Hindus tie, which they had asked to remove before an exam or Janeu. Now, these two are they're not connected to each other. This is some random, instance of a bus driver stopping the bus to offer namaz. I'll say, namaz, bus driver offer namaz, delays all the passengers, but Hindus asked to remove
Right.
mollies.
Sick.
And they're having a fight on
Yeah.
that. Like, the two instances have nothing to do with it. And today, while others are calling for calm, I think Times now, I don't know how some of you people who just got married, or maybe you just have a child, maybe you guys have a kind of defensible excuse to do that, but nothing is worth doing that job. That is just vile. I mean,
No, but
It-
the level of, discourse now is quite upsetting. Like, I'm in a couple of groups with people. Like, these are people that I do know in a tangential sort of way. And especially after there were a whole flurry of reports saying, right, people saying that Kashmiris helped us while they came. My father was killed, but people helped us. The Poniwala helped us, and so on. So there are a lot of these manipulated videos that are now being posted, and posted by people I know who clearly really want to believe in these things. That the Poniwala claimed to have helped, but actually he was laughing in the background. Here is an AI video of him like on the phone. He's doing these things. It's just, there is a very concerted effort to push this idea that everyone is in cahoots and it doesn't matter. And you're saying that Modi just has to say one sentence and that would
and it
help.
could
But
settle on, yeah.
therefore, I buy into conspiracy theories that say that it is in the BJP's interest to not say anything, because
no,
it's
that's
good if
absolutely
this stuff
true.
escalates and all that. Because, and then somebody else I know, again, all very anecdotal, but I was just like alarmed by it. He's running this thing called 26 victims, right? Or is it 27 now? 26 victims in Pahalgam. So he's running 26 days of boycott, where every day he will go into a supermarket, ask them why they're selling halal products, and then he'll post a boycott. And he's trying to like co-op friends and things. And this is like in my neighborhood in fucking Tamil Nadu, like in Chennai. I just really don't understand what he's trying to do against Kashmiris here. But I'm saying people are very happy to believe the worst qualities about Muslims and Kashmiris right now. And the media is feeding into it,
Yeah.
social media is feeding into it, and the government is encouraging it.
In Delhi NCR, they are identifying Muslim shops run by Muslims, and they are telling people in the WhatsApp groups that don't buy, boycott them.
There's that video somebody
This is
posted
on.
of this guy just asking an urban clap person that, are you Hindu or Muslim?
Huh?
And he says, I'm Muslim. He said, go back. Tell your company to send a Muslim.
Say
Send a
Hindu.
Hindu.
To send a Hindu.
एसी के लिए
क्या नाम है
मोहम्मद नजरुल
दोनों
नहीं, मेरा अजहर नाम है
हैं
अजहर
दोनों
नाम।
मुस्लिम हो
हाँ
तुम्हारे से काम नहीं कराना भैया
ठीक।
दूसरे भेजो किसी को जो कोई हिंदू हो उसको भेजो हम मुस्लिमों से काम नहीं कराएंगे
ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं।
So
Yeah, because they want you to post humiliating
So-
videos. Like there
the
are,
only thing
and
I
I know
really
Abhinandan, you're like, yeah, but this is social media and social media is not real life, and I agree with you. But also, I am seeing this in people like in circles that I know, and it is a very
No, of course. I mean,
Oh.
it spreads rapidly on social media. But what you said, anecdotal. It's not entirely anecdotal. I'm not at liberty to take names, but I over the weekend was at a dinner where there was a very senior person who has served in Kashmir in a very important position as part of the government's administration, and he was there, for a long time, pre 370 abrogation, and he's been there for like over a decade in two stints, and he said the thing is that there's never been complete peace in Kashmir. But I was asking, dude, I've shot there, highway on my plate, and it's not like we used to have huge cameras. We were already shooting all over the place. We never. He said the brief time where there's been some semblance is when we have tried to integrate the local community, whether it is integrate them in the forces, do local recruitments, do basically, and he says there will be some people who will become moles or whatever, but cost benefit analysis, that will work. He says the
Yeah.
problem is this government, especially the leadership, doesn't understand. You cannot say we will have peace there, but we will not trust a single Muslim.
Yeah.
They have no interest in integrating the
Not
They
at all.
want Kashmir without the Kashmiris.
Yes,
And one
yes.
of the boys, and he was just a regular shikara wala, he's aapko Kashmiri nahi chahiye, aapko Kashmir chahiye. And that is the actual difference. I think he hit the nail on the head, and he says, I can tell you from having been there for over a decade that you cannot have peace there unless you have peace with them. They may not always agree with you, but you have to make friends with them.
Yes.
And these guys are not interested in making friends with them.
But most people who are fighting insurgency would say exactly this, that this is not in our interest. The kind of violence that we're seeing in mainland India, it really makes our job difficult here. Because that completely alienates the locals, and every work that we're doing, it completely it's completely an undoing. One thing I wanted to add was that in the first 2 days in the aftermath of Pahalgam, the one thing that really actually gave me a lot of hope was there was not a single victim who was not talking about, people who had lost their husbands or sons or fathers. They were making it a point to say how they were helped by the locals. They were underscoring that point despite having gone through such shock and trauma.
Yeah.
Now, it was our job to amplify that. It's the job of the mainstream
And
media.
that they did not do.
Had they done that, it would have made such a difference, you know.
Right. But on Kashmir, Ram, before I have a final question as a historian to you, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, this is something which, I said beyond what I've said. And as Manisha said, I mean, when my column day after talks about some of these instances, and as she said, Manisha said, this is what should be amplified by the mainstream media. I mean, it's
Now, when it
start.
comes to historians, I was having a discussion on this WhatsApp group I'm on, and the writing of history as a political act. And, I said, of course, any history is political because unless you're talking about natural history, it's political history. There is no other third kind of history. I don't know, maybe there is. But because it is a political act, and they were saying, but all the historians in India have been it's been dominated by liberals. There's been no other. I said, well, if the counter view is people like Dinanath Batra, who I interviewed, he's passed on now, but he was an advisor in the Haryana, government. And when I interviewed him, he was telling me that if you have one glass of water and you curse it, the crystals that are formed are ugly. And if you have another glass of water and you recite the Gita or whatever, then it has lovely crystals. I mean, I was like, this guy, if he's your answer to, let's say, Romila Thapar or Ram Guha, then why should he be taken seriously? I mean, it's like saying, I want to play as well as Messi, but I don't want to practice football. So let's just break his legs, not allow him to run, and say, okay, now I'm good as good. Now, so
that's a good analogy. That's a good analogy.
So I said, okay, don't agree with Romila, don't agree with Ram, but show me why. Not because if you talk nicely to one crystal and talk badly to another crystal, the Gita listening water has good crystals. I mean, and you cannot make this guy an advisor to a government to set syllabus for children. Then you'll have a country of morons who will say, rub cow dung and nuclear blasts you will be protected. So when it comes to writing history the world over, what are, in your view, some good counter narratives of history of the subcontinent, maybe other areas? Have you come across, like you were talking about this friend who you disagreed with, but historians who are considered public intellectuals of equal intellectual heft who have kind of wrestled with the narrative and what has emerged from that, whether it's in this country or anywhere else?
Yeah, some suggestions on
I
conservative.
I wrote a long essay 10 years ago in Caravan, which was reprinted in my collection, Democrats and Dissenters, which it bore the title, Why Are There No Conservative Intellectuals in India? And I said that other countries, France, Britain, Germany, United States, there are some very credible conservative intellectuals who've done deep research, have original ideas, don't have to have their books, when they publish their books, don't have to have them photographed with Trump, as our so-called right-wing intellectuals do with Modi. And India once had that tradition, so we did have in the colonial period some outstanding non-liberal conservative historians, Jaduraj Sarkar, R.C. Mazumdar. Now, they have gone. And they've gone because the RSS is completely anti-intellectual. You could be the Swatantra Party and admire Rajaji and have space for ideas and debate and research. But if your icon is, MS Golwalkar or our Home Minister or our Prime Minister, it will only be, there's no depth or subtlety in what you say. So it is, and we do need really high quality writing intellectuals, and maybe they'll come, who'll present a carefully researched, soberly argued, independent minded, conservative position, on why family is important, community is important, why, liberalism leads to extreme woke ideology, individualism, whatever, promiscuity. They are arguments that conservatives can make, and they're made in other contexts, as I talk in this essay. But in India, the RSS, one thing that I'll say, by the way, and this may not have come to your notice or to many of your viewers, these debates about history and, demonizing liberal and left-wing intellectuals are now widely covered. But there's a far more insidious attack on intellectual life in India, orchestrated by the RSS, and that is undermining our high-quality centers of scientific education.
Mhm.
For the first time today, directors of IIT, are appointed
Yeah.
by,
Hmm.
basically the Sangh Parivar has a veto on who can become director, who can't.
Hmm.
Even in Indira Gandhi's emergency, you didn't have that.
Hmm.
In all through the Congress regimes of the past, they interfered in who was vice chancellor of JNU, because they may have wanted a relatively tame guy, but not who's director of the Indian Institute of Science, who's director of the National Chemical Laboratory. Our IITs now, 8 appointments were held up last year because, every ministry now has a Sanghi who's, there supervising who's kosher and who's not. And so, history in that respect, of course, it does lead to the poisoning of minds or the liberating of minds. History is important, but science and technology are much more important to our future. And that's where these guys are killing our best institutions.
Well, there was a article day before yesterday that there is some research that is being done on can Havans lead to cloud seeding. So,
That kind of stuff. And
Scientists.
what happens, Abhinandan, is that ambitious scientists get the mood. So they'll start saying, like the director of IIT Mandi will start saying, I want all my students to be vegetarian.
hmm.
If they're vegetarian, climate change will be, combated and so on. So this is really creepy and dangerous.
No, but just to your point, I've mentioned this earlier. I met someone who is a prominent voice of the right, and this person often appears on panels. I've known this person for a very long time, before the Modi era. And the kind of things this person says, I know they don't believe this. So I met them and I said, what's wrong with you? I know you are not this crazy. We disagree with a lot about it politically, but the response was that if you want, see, I'm not employable as a quote unquote intellectual. Unless I go that far, I get no patronage. And without patronage, I'm irrelevant. I have no source of income. I have no junket to go to. I'm not sent as an Indian representative here. I'm not sent to such and such place. So you have to go that far. If you are the reasonable right-wing voice, no one's going to dalo you any dana because someone is going that far and getting. So it's about getting patronage, and just what scientists, ambitious scientists will put certain projects aside and say, okay, let me start researching his cow lungs are inhaling.
You're
and
playing the
exhaling oxygen.
game for as long as you need to. So as to-
So that's what happens. It incentivizes stupidity.
True.
So on that note, thank you so much, Ram, for giving us over an hour. I really appreciate it. Do enjoy the weather in Kunur. But before we say goodbye, do recommend something that you think could enrich the lives of our viewers and listeners.
So Abhinandan, when I was young and in my 20s and 30s, I would read a lot of fiction, and then I stopped reading fiction. And during the pandemic, I recommenced. And I've recommend 3 books that I've read in the last 2 or 3 years, which I'm truly grateful to have had the time to read before I exit this earth. They're 3 epic novels. set in 3 different continents. Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace,
Mhm.
George Eliot's Middlemarch, and Thomas Mann's Buddenbrooks. And what they tell you about society, culture, economy, politics, gender, religion in 3 great countries, Russia, England, and Germany, respectively. They're very enriched my understanding. And now I read also contemporary fiction. I've started reading more modern novelists. So I'd say, the kind of nourishment and, insight and intelligence a really high quality novel can give you. No work of history can. So I have absolutely no doubt about that. Clearly, I value my books more than a Mills and Boon or some kind of random religious potboiler published under the auspices of, or with the endorsement of Baba Ramdev. But when you read Tolstoy or George Eliot or Thomas Mann, not only do you know that they have a richer, deeper insight into human character, they unveil for you a whole world, which it's a real privilege to enter. So I'd say read more high quality fiction and you'll maybe not become a better human being, but a better informed human being.
Right. Thank you so much, Ram.
Great. Thank you so much.
I'll also send you a podcast since you like Thomas Mann so much. It's a podcast, radio open source, about Thomas Mann. It's called Mann the Magician. And I just learned so much about this man through this podcast. You will enjoy it. I will send you a link. And thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayashree. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
And now for the emails. If you're a subscriber, you can tell us what you think, what we can do differently. You can mail us at podcasts@newslaundry.com or click on the link in the show notes below. Please keep your letter less than 150 words. We have a new system. Now it's been the 4th week of the new system. You can go and listen to the old Haftas to know what that system is. But all letters will be read, acknowledged, addressed. But this episode, just 4 or 5, and I think this episode has been curated by Jayashree.
Me.
Oh, Manisha. Oh,
I
go ahead, please.
Okay, so first up in this episode, we'll be reading out the letters. We'll be reading out 5 letters, but we also received letters from Supriya, Akshara, and Sheetal, which we will read out in the Hafta letters episode next week. We have planned to do this. And I think we have some 200 letters to read next week. Many letters.
Okay.
So the first letter is from Kazuya Mishima. She or he, I'm not very sure, says, the last few days have been unnerving after what happened in Kashmir, with even the society WhatsApp groups being full of Islamophobic hate. Not sure what's the future of this country until BJP dominates most of communication media, be it social, WhatsApp or any other. The blood-hungry nature of some of the seemingly civilized people did come as a surprise. Sharing some of the messages I came across. पूरी धरती पर क्या ऐसी कौम को जीने का हक है? Like she's reading out, I guess.
Yeah.
Person's
even
reading
some
out
of-
what
yeah,
they've read on WhatsApp.
some of
बिल्कुल नहीं,
us.
बट हमारे कंट्री में हमें ही डर के रहना है. हर हिंदू को मुसलमान बनना है. आज हर पेंटर मुस्लिम है, हर मेड, सब जगह ये है, everywhere, because we are secular. Also, she says, shout out to Shardul, my fellow Tekken aficionado. What is Tekken?
It's a game.
Game. I
The
owe you.
name she's using is from Tekken. Kazuya Mishima.
Oh, I see.
Okay. I owe you a pint, my friend. So it's a female character, Kazuya Mishima.
No, I think Kazuya is a man.
Okay. So yeah, no, Raman was also telling us about all the WhatsApp stuff that's been happening in his locality. It's been quite aggressive and bad. Luckily, I'm not part of any WhatsApp group.
I too
so
just
don't-
made an exit.
I stay in the one WhatsApp group because I like to keep an eye on what my
No,
parents are doing.
I also thought the same. I
It became too toxic.
wanted to say, it's so toxic, you can't take it.
Yeah.
It's affecting me. It's affecting my
I
health.
just read a really funny. Can I just read out 2 lines of a really funny WhatsApp group that I got, which was really funny? Operation Screaming Thunder. India deploys its deadliest arsenal TV anchors. Following Pahalgam attack, India has unleashed its most feared and ferocious combat force, the TV Studio Rapid Reaction Force. Leading the charge is none other than Lieutenant General Arnab Goswami, GOC Northern Command Republic Headquarters, who's shouting orders and rhetorical missiles straight from his fortified Mumbai bunker, also known as Studio 5 War Room. Military-grade microphones have been deployed and sound levels have exceeded Geneva Convention limits. Major General Anjana Om Kashyap of Elite 17 Mountain Strike Corps is flanking him from Noida Forward Operating Base. She's operating cutting-edge equipment, 4K graphics, 3D animation, and a battalion of panelists per minute. Strategic doctrine, shout first, behave theatrical. It's really funny, the whole thing.
Did you write this and send it on your group?
Writing it. No, I got it from someone.
We got a high.
It's by somebody called R.K. Singh, actually, who runs something called Roz Naam Cha. Okay. Anonymous says the problem with India in general is that the anti-hate party just doesn't exist. It doesn't appear that everyone has realized that the way to win votes is by dividing, and hence they keep their traps shut when the BJP and its minions go on a rampage online and in the media against Muslims or any minority. The time we are in right now, where being a Muslim at this moment is horribly scary, no Rahul Gandhi or Arvind Kejriwal or Mamata Banerjee or anyone else have not even remotely tried to lower the temperature in the country. I honestly feel bad for the Muslim population in our country, where I see the level of hate that's becoming mainstream and the helplessness of people who know there's nobody that'll come to help them if they raise their voices against it.
I thought Omar Abdullah gave quite a good speech.
Yeah, he gave a good speech.
Please.
Advi says, hi, hope you're all well. Huge fan of your work and the incredible journalism you all do. I was wondering if you were planning to invite a Pakistani journalist, thinker, academic to discuss the attack in Pahalgam, the Pakistani perspective, reaction, as well as Kashmiri academics' voices.
We will
Pakistani
be put under UAPA.
Pakistani khud hi fed up hai apni country se, the sensible ones
Yeah,
at
of
least.
course. The thing is, that if only Arnab and all can have Pakistani guests, if anybody else has a Pakistani guest, you would-
UAPA lag gaya.
but other than that, sir, I would have happily even got it. It's not possible to have a discussion because even on that side, it'll end up being either it'll be really shallow or it'll end up being, because there is a tendency of, I think it's a subcontinent thing, the dispassionate way in which I interviewed the editor of Haaretz,
Haaretz.
BBC.
the Israeli newspaper.
Haaretz. Yeah.
Right. You know, the dispassionate way
Haaretz,
with
yeah.
which he can dissect his own country, I genuinely think even the most evolved voices in India or Pakistan
Won't be able to do it.
won't be able to do it. And there are, complex sociological reasons for that, which is why I don't think there is any
But actually,
value add.
Haaretz, that's a good example. Right when they started the offensive on Gaza, they were so critical.
Dude, the kind of stuff
And
that
there was
she
such
said.
a horrible, it was such a horrible
No,
massacre that had happened, but he was very,
No.
the paper was very steadfast.
And of course,
in
the
its-
battle here is not that one-sided or that violent. But I don't believe any Indian public intellectual or Pakistani public intellectual can so dispassionately talk about what's happening. It's just not possible.
Do you think it's also because they feel like this need to be a little performative for the Indian or the Pakistani audience, that you cannot be dispassionate about it? You should very consistently try and reiterate, no, but I still think X and Y. And I don't know, it never feels like you're organically just speaking in that authentic way. It just feels like we are performing for the audience, which requires us to say certain things.
No,
This
no,
is
I-
India, Pakistan.
No, I'll tell you why I think it is. It's because I genuinely believe we cannot not call the people who have killed either the tourists last week, or the killings earlier. We can't not call them terrorists, in
Yeah.
my view.
Hmm.
And I don't think I'm
Same here.
pandering to any nationalist fervor. I genuinely think you can't not call them terrorists. Now, for whatever reasons, even the most, in their terms, the most liberal or the most non-nationalistic public intellectual can call
Would
them
not.
terrorists. On that only the talk will break down.
Got it.
I mean, I've spoken to so many people
Also,
who
दहशतगर्द तो ये तो बोला है उन्होंने, but they won't say Pakistan से आए हैं. They'll say हाँ terrorism is bad, we don't support it, ये वो.
Yeah, but they will say these are all freedom fighters in your own
They're
country.
calling them militants.
They
even
will not
today.
call them terrorists. It is so. You see, it's just I don't see any value add with the Pakistani voice
And
on this
even
discussion.
even the journalists based in Kashmir, they are sending us, the
There's a
ideas.
fear
pictures.
there.
Now they also have a fear. They can't
They can't speak
call
up.
them terrorists.
Yeah,
They
so-
call them
Because they-
militants.
Fear.
The moment they will call them terrorists.
So that it's just the fear is too
They'll be
much.
gunned down.
Huh.
So Abhijit says, I was in Himachal when Pahalgam happened. The sentiment there was that of sympathy for the locals. Season kharab ho gaya unka. they said.
Mm.
This sympathy I find missing from all public discussions. The immediate and catastrophic impact it would bring to Kashmir's economy isn't highlighted by the media or acknowledged by the people in power. We must remember that there are people whose livelihoods depended on this season and who had invested in this. Zero tourism would mean small businesses going bankrupt, job losses, migration, and people pushed under the poverty line. They would need support. I hope once our boiling blood calms down, we're able to spare a thought for them. Of course, only after we have annihilated Pakistan. For now, as with all discussions on Kashmir, the plight of the Kashmiri is missing. Actually, in all of this, the nicer, the kinder, and the most saner voices have just been ordinary people. Like you just met someone who said, "Becharo ka season kharab ho gaya." Waise people who were traveling in Kashmir. And it's really sad that you haven't found that in mainstream politics and the media, which you look up to. Usually it should be the other way. The public's going mad and we inject calmness and sanity.
या तो
Here
उल्टा हो
the
रहा है.
ulta ho raha hai. Public is injecting. Public is appealing on news channels that please don't do this. Srijata, they says, "Hi NLT, my partner introduced me to Newslaundry and the world of independent journalism, a much needed breath of fresh air when mainstream media often misrepresents ground realities. Life feels a lot more informed since. A small suggestion, consider adding a citizens journalist page where users can upload and share verified stories or images. It could drive more engagement. You're all doing a fantastic job. I absolutely love Hafta and TNM and TVN.
Nuisance.
Oh, TVN. I was like, thanks. We never miss an episode. Thank you for staying true to your mission and continuing to empower the public with honest journalism. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to your partner for introducing you to the world of independent media. Dipankar says, "Hello, the discussion about Bengal is interesting. Adding some nuance. Bengal has a diverse population, 25% Muslims, 25% SC/ST, 13% non-Bengali origin, and a couple of 1% Nepalis. The Muslims are with TMC and the 13% with non-Bengal origin go with the BJP. The SC/ST is a neglected segment. The Bengal caste system is socially inclusive but economically exclusive. BJP worked hard to sway the Matuas who needed citizenship and the Rajbanshis of neglected North Bengal who are also come under the scheduled caste category. And Nepali vote is for the BJP to help statehood for the Gorkha land. The forward caste vote among Bengali Hindus is still significantly with TMC as the BJP's policies are seen as culture war. This excludes a few which see Mamata as an usurper, but they gravitate to the left of the Congress. BJP wants to break by taking over Vivekananda, Aurobindo, Bose and others." Okay.
Very
And
intelligent
Didi has
guys.
had, like Didi's ad spree yesterday was most interesting. It's her Ram Mandir moment actually before elections.
This
She's inaugurating
temple.
this big temple there, Jagannath temple.
But you saw all the reportage on that big error that was in the ad, no?
What?
Use a picture from Google Maps, I think, to show where it'll be. But unfortunately, one of the locations marked on that Google Maps screenshot said female vibrators in Digga. And that was printed in the
No
photo
way.
that went.
Are you sure this is not some WhatsApp hoax you're fallen
I
for?
completely
No.
missed this.
I saw a news report.
Only Jayashree can give us.
Dude, this
What does
is
that say
too
about
funny, yeah. Fantastic.
I'll just
What a
one
sad.
check.
catch, yeah.
So this
what
got printed in the ad.
Yeah. So,
But I guess you had to really blow it up to read it, I'm guessing.
yeah, you never see it, but it is
Yeah,
there.
but someone must
So-
have noticed it now. Okay, fantastic.
How
Chalo.
nutty is this?
Right.
That's it for the emails, and now we have many, many letters which we shall tackle next week.
Next week we'll
We have
you know,
too many. We'll really have to figure out.
we'll do a 1.5 hour of just letters.
But we have to also then arrange them in a way which is all
Yeah,
topics on.
subject.
Yeah.
The ones that are 150 words, they just have to be
But
compressed.
also, like some of them are, one topic. So we'll have to like.
Yeah, that we
tackle
can
all
do.
of them
I'm
together.
sure our producer will find some young interns to be able to do that.
On
let's-
May Day.
So let's get the recommendations. Jayashree, want to go first?
Yeah, I have two recommendations. One is Vanity Fair's very entertaining profile of Gavin McInnes. So he is the founder of Proud Boys, which is that far-right group in
Yeah.
America. But his story is very interesting. He was born in Scotland. He emigrated to Canada, and there he was the OG hipster. He used to play in a punk band. He joined socially conscious groups because they were very cool. At the age of 24, he co-founded Vice. Then he left Vice. He lost a bunch of friends and family members. He lost his stake in Vice. He lost friends. He lost a lot of brain cells. And somehow he set up Proud Boys. So it's an interesting sort of journey, also because you feel like we could be this man, except that we are not, thank God. So that's one. The second, which I think is a very topical story for Press Freedom Day, is by the Reporters Collective. It's called What Killed Mukesh Chandrakar. So basically, the story of the journalist who was murdered a few months ago, and it's told by 3 journalists who also knew him. And it tells 2 stories. One is who was Mukesh and how did he come to die? And the other is about this underbelly of contracts, kickbacks, and corruption in Chhattisgarh and the villagers and everyday people who suffer through it. So Mukesh had reported on it, and it was the trigger for his murder. So I thought it was very interesting. It was also, I don't know if it is the greatest piece of reporting I've written or anything like that, but just that it was so lovingly told. I mean, it really tries to paint this picture of this man, the setting that he lived in, the district that he worked in, and you really feel for the authors of the story. You really feel for these really small town journalists. So I think it's very important.
Right. Thank you, Manisha.
So, really, really deeply, richly reported piece on the Reporters Collective, since it is Press Freedom Day. It's about the death of Mukesh Chandrakar.
That's the story
What-
I just.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
killed Mukesh Chandrakar, Malini Subramaniam, Pushpa Rokte, and Ronak Shavare. The same recommendation as yours, Jayashree. It's really, and also support Reporters Collective. I think very few organizations are able to, report in such a sustained way, and each of their stories are investigative in some way or the other. It's very hard to kind of sustain and manage. So kudos to Reporters Collective for this piece. The piece that I had spoken about on the journalist from UP, this was by Tanishka. It was about 2 years ago. But I think it's important to revisit it just to see what it takes to be a journalist in small town India, what it extracts out of you. And sometimes it's not even the governments that get you or the police that puts you in jail. It's just your own inability to take care of you after having devoted such a long time to the profession that you love. So I think that piece really brings that out very well.
Raman sir.
I have 2 recommendations, but nothing about the media. There's one book, of course, we are planning to make a documentary on it. So I read The Truth Pill. This is by Dinesh S. Thakur and Prashant Reddy. The book is really amazing. I mean, when it comes to the facts, so many facts about how the drugs get regulated in India. Especially, I would like to draw, your attention towards the Ayurveda drugs and Ministry of Ayurveda, and we plan to make a documentary on that. So, The Truth Pill by Dinesh S. Thakur and Prashant Reddy. And second is a couple of podcasts with the same person. This is anybody, I mean, people have appreciated, I had once referred one health podcast by Huberman with Casey Means. So this is another podcast by Huberman with Stuart McGill. He is an authority on your back. So I think at this age, I have come to know how to stand, how to drive, because I was facing this problem. So I get all kind of tests done with reputed hospitals, spending 28,000 rupees just on the test, and they never tell you what is wrong with you, how you should stand. I think I've learned standing yesterday. It's only and even driving
and sitting and
so Stuart
walking and
McGill,
sleeping.
Stuart McGill with Huberman, and there is another Dr. Peter Attia. So he has given his podcast with Peter Attia also. Once you see his podcast, you can read his book as well.
Right. I have 2 recommendations. One is on this whole TikTok scandal that got an election cancelled. It is the story of the TikTokers who made this whole thing happen. It's a BBC report called "The TikTokers Accused of Triggering an Election Scandal." It's a fascinating piece. I highly recommend it. And the second is, it's an NPR podcast, "When Do Boycotts Work?" Recently, basically, Target was there was a boycott because its decision to pull back on its DEI policies. So it goes over all the times the brand has been boycotted for political reasons. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So they've tried to identify what makes a boycott work. Interesting in times we live in. Right. I'd like to thank all of you. Have a fantastic week. Remember, it's Press Freedom Day. It's a very important day. It is a day that should mean a lot to everybody, not just to news organizations. I have told you why often enough. So do buy that subscription for a friend, a relative, a family member, anyone you think will eventually appreciate journalism, like Mr. Guha said, that is not funded by large corporations or governments. It's important. I'd like to thank our wonderful sound recordist Anil, our wonderful producer Priyali, and Ashish is also around. I'm guessing he's also producing. And thank you, Raman sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayashree. Thank you,
Thank you.
Manisha.
Thank you
Leave you with this song. Remember,
for the
together
journalists.
we can, and together we will keep media independent.